All right, so we're just here.
Right onto Highway 7.
Yes, thank you. All right, so I'm going to go to settings here. I'm going to turn off the voice prompts here. So right now it is October 18th. Yesterday, did a bunch of recording. Probably going to post those videos a bit later on, or you'll probably see these before, actually. Had a lot of problems with the camera. My other camera wasn't working, had a corrupted SD card issue, so I used my phone. And the phone's mount I had to modify to run on the GoPro assembly, just did not like it. So that video's going to be shaky. I'm sorry for any motion sickness. If you end up watching the videos, end up actually posting them. But in any case, so today, like I said, is October 18th. I'm heading up to Vaughan here just to kind of stop by the Tesla dealership here. So I'm coming from Markham all the way heading out to Vaughan. And I just kind of want to talk about a little bit more in depth of the FSD. This is kind of going to be a little bit of a rehash of what happened yesterday, and talking about that incident, and also just kind of what FSD is about and kind of what my experience has been so far. So a little bit of a history quickly again on FSD. Sorry if it sounds like I'm going over it again, but FSD, as we know it today, came out in about 2020. It was initially a beta and essentially allowed Tesla vehicles with a certain hardware requirement, starting off on the Model 3 and the Model Y, to allow you to essentially drive the car hands-free. This was also the time when Tesla was phasing out their ultrasonic sensors that were found on the X and the S. Ultrasonic sensors are basically radar sensors. They're built into the bodywork itself, and they send out pulse waves to kind of be able to use sound waves to figure out where things are. And Elon, or Tesla as a whole, but Elon was the one who really was promoting this, deactivated them and said we're no longer going to use that, because what they were at least finding was that there was too much noise, as it was described, in the communications between the different systems. Basically, one system is getting one reading, one system is getting another reading, and the car get confused. And what's actually interesting is when you read if you read a lot of the responses from people up online that transferred from the original FSD with the ultrasonic to the pure Tesla Vision system, or when Tesla Vision basically took over on their cars, they had a lot less issues with things like false stops and starts, and it seemed like the car was a little less jittery, as they described it. Right now, this car is running 12.5.4.1. I will update that in the video description if I'm wrong by that, or I'll post it, and I'll post a little tiny note there just to kind of make that correction. So right now, I'm basically just letting the car drive itself 100% autonomously. I will jump in and make some corrections if I need to. A couple things I have noticed since yesterday, when I was doing a little bit more of an extensive run at nighttime. Drove from Vaughan to Toronto back up to Markham, and a little bit there. And we had a number of issues with the system, primarily on the highway. If it was not able, or wasn't at least seeing the lane was ending early, and it would just jump over to the left-hand lane. So if you're in the right lane, the right lane's ending. If you get into the left lane, for example, it wouldn't even put the ticker on. It would just jump over immediately. So that was very disconcerting. Another issue we were having too was that in numerous situations, it would be a green light and the car would just not want to go through the intersection. It would just stop dead in its tracks. That was also very disconcerting as well. I'm just going to increase the speed here a little bit. Not the radio, the speed. Just because traffic flow this time of day is a little more. I'm going to try to get over in the right-hand lane a little bit. I'll let the car jump over when it gets a chance. Let's see what it's going to do. So I'm actually manually setting the car up against the right lane here, just forcing it to signal over. And perfect, beautiful. But one of the things that I definitely noticed when I was driving around yesterday was in very technical situations. So, for example, we were crossing a very narrow lane. The car got a little bit lost there. Around Toronto, especially with a lot of construction work in Toronto going on right now, the car did not like that much. It was not able to see that it was in a right-hand turn lane for some reason, and it kept trying to get into the right-hand turn lanes because it was free. But the reason it was free is because that's a right-hand turn lane, and it would then try to go into the intersection and cut in front of people. And I had to take over at least 2 or 3 times during that incident. But outside of that, this is kind of where the big question of, the launch of a couple weeks, I think it was almost a week ago actually today, where, the We Robot launch of the Cybercab or RoboCab and whatever they're going to call it, that whole system of being able to, basically get picked up and dropped off autonomously. And, what's very interesting was those cars don't have steering wheels and they don't have pedals. So is there going to be a button or an override switch on the dashboard for someone to hit to stop the car in case of an emergency? I would assume so. It was also mentioned during the talk that most likely the Model Y and the Model Y and Model 3 will be also getting the fully autonomous or unsupervised update sometime 2025, 2026, it sounds like. Again, that's all based on regulations from the government. California and Texas apparently have signed up for it, and I get the feeling that Toronto might also sign up for this as well. No real evidence I have to say that, just I feel like Toronto might be one of the cities that will jump on that. Toronto tends to be a little bit more tech savvy with this kind of stuff. But, in the States especially, places like San Francisco, well known down there in California, there is an absolute ton of fully autonomous robo-taxis, and ironically, they use a bunch of sensors from, ultrasonic to LiDAR to camera-based systems, and Tesla is just strictly sticking with their guns on the Tesla Vision system, which, from my experience yesterday and my wife's comments after the drive, overall the car felt pretty confident. When I had to jump in, I want to say that it wasn't in situations that I felt nervous about, but definitely some situations were a little weirder than others. Like, okay, see, that light turned yellow, the car hesitated, and it went through in the end. So that's fine. But no, yesterday was a great drive, really eye-opener for, what FSD can do. If you're actually looking at, again, getting FSD on a Tesla, I believe any Model 3 that was produced is able to get the full FSD. There seems to be some confusion online and also even at the dealership of being able to upgrade FSD from, I think it's 1.5, 2.2. I'll list in the video, I'll probably do a pop-up here in a second about, different versions of the hardware. But there appears to be an ability for, at least at this time, that you can take an older Model 3 and an older Model Y, and you can actually upgrade them to the newest hardware through Tesla for around $1,000 to $1,500. Not completely sure about that. I'm stopping by the dealership, actually. I'll actually stop in with service and ask them that question directly. Again, maybe that information is no longer valid, or they no longer do that anymore. So that's going to be kind of up in the air when that happens. But essentially what that means is that all those old Model 3s and Model Ys that are hanging around, those will also be able to have full FSD. They currently do. And they'll also be able to hopefully have also fully autonomous. But we'll see what the final rollout looks like. A lot of information since the We Robot launch has been kind of scarce. I think the We Robot launch, just as a side note here, was not the best launch ever. Again, I'm making comments about $1 trillion companies and people worth hundreds of billions of dollars, so take it with a grain of salt. But it wasn't the best presentation. Started late, an hour. Kind of a little bit confusing as to what they were trying to really show off. They showed off the new Cybercab or the Model 2. Maybe Model 2 is still in the works. Who knows? Maybe the Cybercab, maybe we'll see what happens in this common age as well. But maybe the Cybercab will have a Model 2 version of it that has a steering wheel and a bit more features for the driver. I'm not exactly sure, but we'll kind of see what the future brings on that. But the Cybercab, looks a lot like the XL1 from Volkswagen. That was a kind of a halo limited production. I think only 250 were made. Sort of like a halo car for the Volkswagen Group. It was under PIEC, and it was to do the 1 liter per 100 kilometer rating, which I don't know what that is in miles per gallon. I'll pop that up here as a comparison, but it was the most efficient car at the time, and that was really what they were striving for. And the new Cybercab looks exactly like it, or RoboCab, whichever they're calling it, looks exactly like it. So makes kind of some sense just in terms of how you would, the size of the vehicle, how you would, design it to be efficient in the air, especially when it comes to being low coefficient of drag. It's almost identical as you would expect it to be. But overall, FSD, in my experience, has come a long, long way. My confidence level in the system is extremely high, I would say. Again, you have to treat FSD like basically a pilot treats autopilot when he's up in the air. Yes, it can fly the plane. Yes, it's going to work 99% of the time. But, you as a driver or as a pilot in a plane, you're responsible at the end of the day for the vehicle or the aircraft you're flying. So you need to still be in some form of control and be able to take over in the event something happens. So although the car is driving itself, as you can see, I still need to be able to grab the wheel and take over. And in some situations, when things get a little close, I definitely will grab the wheel, or not grab the wheel, but have my hands on the wheel like I'm doing right now, and I'll put my foot over the brake just in case it jumps in. Sorry, just in case I have to jump in. One other note also from my experience so far with, the full self-autonomous driving, full FSD, has been that in the event the car doesn't know what to do, it stops moving, which in reality is actually a really, really good thing. I like that, but at the same time, it's also a little bit concerning because, for example, and yesterday again, I was driving in Toronto. They are running it completely autonomously. I keep saying that word over again, but it went up. I was at a green light intersection. I'm pulling up to the green light intersection, and the car just stopped at the intersection. No rhyme or reason, no real kind of explanation why it did that. It just stopped dead for whatever. And I had to kind of give the car a bit of some gas to actually get it going again. But interestingly enough, if the car doesn't know what it wants to do and you actually put your foot on the accelerator, it will actually just still keep going. So if you're in a situation where the car is a little hesitant, you give a bit of power, it will actually keep moving forward, which is, I guess, kind of nice to kind of push the system forward a little bit. But again, not always something that's, again, you have to be cognizant about that. And it goes back to the question of how these cyber cabs are going to work. Is the system able to handle, the complexity of driving these cars around? And I have a high level of confidence it will, but there's no real guarantee that it's going to work out in the first place. Yeah, but as a whole here, just, driving along on these kind of roads, the vehicle, the FSD mode really likes this kind of stuff here. When there's cars in front of it, when it's clearly marked lanes, and you're on well-driven surface streets, then the car has no real issue whatsoever. It's when you start getting into more of the construction areas, it's when you start getting into more of the broken up roads, it's more when you start getting in situations where there's no car in front of you that it can follow, then the system starts to do some weird stuff. And I can't really fault it too much because I've been with humans driving around Toronto who also don't know how to drive either. So in comparison, FSD did a great job. My only other comments I would say, though, in terms of what we had last night happen, which I'm interested in seeing more of, is that the car will hesitate in certain situations. And that hesitation is a little weird because it'll happen. Like, for example, the wheel will start to jitter. It'll start to just do this, left and right, left and right, left and right, because it's trying to kind of get itself going forward, but it doesn't know what to do. And for example, I had a situation where I was making a right-hand turn, the car was doing it itself, and it pulled up to the intersection, and it made the last two corners just fine, but this one corner it didn't like, and it stopped, and it started doing this whole jittery thing. And the guy that was trying to make a left-hand turn thought I was giving him the right of way to turn left, so he started turning left, and the car then decided to go. So then he had to hit his brakes. So stuff like that. Again, if you're really, really, really in the city, tons of traffic moving around, tons of broken up roads, you're in construction zones, FSD gets overwhelmed, I don't blame it too much because, of course, that is to be expected. One thing I do like, though, is that the screen down here, especially the monitoring system they have for you to actually see, what the car sees, is really reassuring because I know exactly, I know the car is seeing, and I can kind of make predictions based upon that. So if I'm coming up and I see a bicyclist on the road in front of me, and I look down at my screen and I see the bicyclist pop up, well, I know the car sees it. So the car knows what it's kind of doing at this time, and it figures out what it's got to do next, which is great. I think what's more kind of disconcerting, though, is that it shows vehicles, but it sometimes doesn't know what the vehicle is, so it'll just make up something. For example, any large vehicle, it assumes it's a truck, even if it's not a real truck. So it puts a placeholder there, which I guess is fine. But sometimes we driving past 2 or 3 cars and it'll think it's a truck. Or I've seen situations too where you're coming up to an intersection where it thinks there's a bunch of cars parked on the side of the road when in reality it's a bunch of like pylons. I've seen that pop up a couple times too. So just something to be, I'm not sure if that's just because it's been getting a placeholder or if the car does actually know what that object is and it's just filling in the blanks with something else. Yesterday also we were getting off the highway and one lane was closed off, and I guess on the system it may have seen that there were pylons there, but from what I could see it didn't. So, it seems like it understands traffic cones, like the tall, again, I'll pop up a photo here of the, the large highway cones. It sees those really well, but the smaller orange cones that are sometimes used where I live, not so much. And maybe it saw it, but the system here didn't show it. And, maybe I should have jumped over and seen what would have happened there. So again, not terribly sure. But overall, the car itself has been running fantastically. I remember reading a report recently that they said that a test was done where every 13 miles, 20 kilometers or so, the human interaction was required. I think that, again, that depends on where you're living and also the environment you're driving in. So, for example, highly congested areas that are maybe not as common for Teslas to be in, I feel like would probably be less likely to be as stable of a system compared to somewhere like where there's a ton of Teslas driving around and, there's a bit more information for the system to kind of grasp. Officially, Teslas don't talk with each other. At least that's what I believe is known at this time. But I definitely have seen situations where I'll have FSD on and I'll have like a Model 3 next to me or a Model Y, and the car will latch onto that car more. Okay, it's giving me a notification to kind of put my hands back on the wheel for a second there. That's fine. And it will actually follow that car. So if that car's making a turn, going around other cars, it will do the exact same thing. So not too sure if it knows that's a Tesla and it's following along with it. But we'll see what kind of feature brings along for the Tesla system. Again, by the time this video goes up, this all information I'm giving you right now could be completely debunked, or no longer valid anymore. So just take that as you will. Another thing I was reading up about last night with the, the push for the self-driving capabilities of these vehicles is that when it comes to the when it really breaks down and comes to the nitty-gritty of what, the long-term strategy is with FSD, it really does seem like that Tesla is trying to make these cars, especially, as profit-driven vehicles. The idea that you're able to buy one of these vehicles, as an example, and basically turn it into an Uber or a Lyft system completely without having to do any kind of crazy modifications. The idea that a company could buy up a bunch of Teslas and turn those units into self-driving cars and turn that into basically a business. I feel like one of the big issues that we're going to see is that one of the comments that Elon Musk had made, and my dad actually made a good comment about this as well, is the idea of removing parking lots, where we're able to have cars that are constantly floating around that we can just pick up and go with, and the ability just to get in the car, and then once you're done with the car, it leaves off, and it goes on and does its thing. I think is a really interesting idea, but my dad did mention that, parking lots are massive profit generators for not only private companies, but also for the government, right? So you're going to have to convince the government that, hey, by the way, we're going to be making these autonomous vehicles on the road that are also have the intention of removing things like bus systems as a requirement, that are going to also, that are going to require buses to be stopped, that are going to require, buses not to be used as much, or are going to basically make your big parking lots no longer needed anymore. In one way, that's good. But I also think it's going to be a bit more complicated just because a lot of cities in the States, especially and up here in Canada, have certain regulations that the size of the business must have a certain size of parking. So, for example, stadiums, because the amount of people that come to a stadium, like a massive sports stadium, soccer, hockey, football, whichever, they have to have a certain amount of parking spots available for that stadium to be utilized. So they're still going to have to use the land for something. It's not going to be like, oh, once these cars are everywhere, we could shut that down. This is going to be a long legal and a regulatory battle. But you know what? I will say, though, that, back in 2013, when the Google car was being discussed and the Google self-driving car was being talked about, and when Elon Musk was talking about this whole, full self-driving initiative, people thought it's never going to happen. It's going to be shut down immediately. Won't ever occur. But I'm here. I'm in the car. It's driving itself. I've touched the wheel twice, 3 times maybe, just to kind of let the system know I'm here. And yeah, it's been pretty incredible so far. One definite thing that I have been noticing, though, is that there has been a rise in people, especially online, tricking the system to, oh, look at me, I have a weight on the steering wheel here, so it will drive without me having to touch the wheel. Or people sleeping in the back seats, or people using an actual physical dummy, like actually putting a mannequin in the front seat here with glasses on to trick the system to think there's a driver. Don't do that, please. It's kind of a cool thing to show off, but in reality, what you're doing is you're just building up 2 things. One, you're making the system seem more and more dangerous than it actually is. You're giving regulators and other car companies more leverage to lobby to have this kind of system shut down or heavily limited. And if there is an accident, again, you're still responsible for the car. If you're messing with the car, you're messing with the system, so you're trying to do stuff to trick the system, it's not going to go well. There have been deaths because of the failures of autopilot. But then also there have been probably tens of thousands of lives saved because the autopilot system was able to jump in and, save the car. So yeah, just, be aware of your surroundings when you're using the system and, let the system kind of do its thing. Because remember, there's a term called the elephant path, I believe it is. Again, I'll add it in if it's not, if I made that mistake. But the idea of the elephant path basically is that over time, humans by nature will create paths of least resistance. And, classically, schools in the past, I can't remember if it was Stanford University that did this, but they didn't pave the sidewalks. When they first opened up their main campus, they actually let people cross the grass. And eventually where the dead grass was the elephant path where people went with less resistance, and they paved that over. And that's also kind of the way that Tesla's self-driving mode is functioning as well. Over millions and millions and millions and millions of data inputs on the same car, on the same road at the same time, these cars share the information, or Tesla at least gets that information and uses it to make the cars better on the road and safer. And if you're messing with that, you're messing up the data points. So, just be aware of that as a whole. If you want to get FSD, again, this is something I talked about in earlier videos, but just as a note here again, you are able to get it as a buyout in Canada. So you could buy it out entirely for the vehicle. It's around $11,000 Canadian to buy outright, which again is a very expensive option, but you can option it out afterwards if you choose to. So if you buy one that doesn't have it on, you can simply just turn it on if you want to. There is also the ability to have it as a subscription model. It's about $100 a month, $99 Canadian a month here. That one isn't terrible. I hate subscription models on cars. I think that a feature on a car being a subscription model is just completely unacceptable in a lot of cases. I know Sirius Satellite Radio and them, that's one, but, you hear stories of heated seats you have to pay for every month. No, it's BS. So Tesla giving you the ability to buy it outright is great. And also, when the car is sold off, it will go with the car itself. So if you want to sell it off, that's an option that's activated. So it does have value there. And also, I believe for a short period of time when the new Model 3 was coming out, and I think also the Model Y, you're able to transfer over your purchase of FSD to your new car as well. I don't know if that's going to make it less valuable, but I think if you trade into Tesla, you will actually get a rebate on that. You will actually get transferred over. One thing to note, though, not really about FSD, but something I've just noticed, and I've never seen another company do this before, but you cannot buy out a Tesla after your lease. So if you finance a Tesla, you obviously keep it. If you buy it with cash, it's your car. If you lease it though, so for example, I was looking at some lease rates for these cars and they're really good. You can basically, if you equate for, rebates and gas savings, you're looking at around 400 to 500 bucks a month, even for a really nice model. So it's not unacceptable, I'll say. But I noticed there was no buyout at the end of the lease because, I've done leases a number of times for both work and personal. We've had leases done. So, there's also companies like Lease Busters where you can take over a lease from someone else. And I've done that in the past a couple times. It was great. But there's no buyout. I was confused. So I actually talked with this Tesla sales rep and looked it up online. And yeah, if you lease a Tesla, let's say you get a great model, a great spec, at a great deal, and you want to keep the car, you can't. Because Tesla's taking it back and that's it. I believe the Model S and Model X may have the ability to be bought out. I wasn't very clear on that. But if you buy a Model 3 or Model Y on a lease, you lose the car. The second that car becomes a lease object, you are not allowed to buy the car at the end. I'm not exactly sure why that's the case. I think it was mainly just due to COVID. People were picking up these cars on leases for like the shortest term lease possible because it was cheap a month to do that. And then when they had the car at the end, they would simply just flip it for sale or return the car later on because the resale value of them was so high compared to the original value of the car. If you had the car, it was worth like almost 50% more immediately. So that may have been a way Tesla was trying to get around that, but there has never really been a clear answer, at least that I can find, as to why Tesla doesn't allow you to buy out after a lease. Hopefully that changes in the future, because again, if I have a lease, let's say I get a 3-4 year lease, and at the end I'm like, hey, I like this car, the new cars aren't as much as I'd like them to be, I would rather just buy the car out. Well, you're not allowed to do that, so that kind of sucks. But in any case, so yeah, I mean, you can see here, I've touched the wheel a couple of times. This is stop and go traffic. This, and also on the highway, the system is completely fine. No issues, very little interaction needed, high level confidence here. But when you get into the city, like I said, Toronto, the weird roads, the weird sizes, the inconsistency of the surfaces, you have new lines painted over old lines, and you have old lines on top of new lines for traffic signaling. The system doesn't like that, and like I said, quite frankly, I know a lot of humans that don't like that either. But yeah, overall, I think if you're in the market to get a Tesla, and you're wondering whether or not FSD is something you actually want to get, I would definitely say, get one, rent one out if you can, get your hands on one for an overnight test drive. I know Tesla does offer that still. Grab one if you can and just experience this, because it really does make you realize that a lot of the issues that we've been told about in the past with full FSD is just, it's not here anymore, thankfully. They've really, really come a long way. But again, yeah, so I'm probably going to cut the video off here. I'm getting close to destination, and thanks for watching.